Okay. Did you have a nice lunch? Yeah, obviously not. So, we are continuing with a lecture that's a little bit different than what we've heard so far. And I'm giving Rick the word from then on. Let's welcome our lecturer.
Hi, yes, as it said, my name's Rick. I'm just going to do a quick talk on the Perl market, the recruitment market. So just to give you a heads up of who I am, I specialize in recruitment in Perl. I've been a headhunter at Alligo for a number of years, placing candidates across the UK, the US, and Europe, and across a number of cities: Amsterdam, Paris, Berlin, Zurich, Madrid, Stockholm, and of course, the UK. Now, what I do is I'm more of a consultant. I work with companies, I work with candidates on finding them the right opportunity, understanding their needs and how we can get the best opportunity for them or the best candidate. I spend a lot of time liaising with developers all around Europe and presenting them opportunities, primarily in the UK, but also across other EU countries as well. Why does that not come up? I'm not getting the slide. There we go. That makes more sense. As I was saying, yeah, so I get a lot of opportunities ranging from permanent contract, fixed-term contract, and even freelance. And as I said, I work with companies across the world to present the best talent. Now, what I do for a candidate is I offer CV advice, which I'll come on to in a bit. And so another service we provide is obviously interview coaching, and again, I'll dip into that in a minute. So the main aim for us is to offer candidates the opportunity and give them an insight into the market. So what I'll cover today is, as I already alluded to, the Perl market is strong and it's growing. It's really never been a much better time to be a Perl developer. So I'm just going to cover from obviously the client's perspective or company, i.e. what hiring managers want, how are they approaching it, what are they looking to pay. It's about identifying the right talent and understanding company culture. And from the candidate's perspective, I'll go into detail about what sort of skill set is fashionable, what's marketable, and how we can stand out from the crowd. How we can be a stronger force in what is very much a candidate-driven market. And what I mean by that is I had a candidate who was on the market for 2 weeks. At the end of the second week, he had 5 permanent offers. So the market is moving quickly. We've moved away from the day where we had more candidates, less jobs. We're now in the fact we've got less candidates, more jobs. So it is a good time to be a developer. So I also highlight the growth of the market. I'll talk in particular about what sort of sectors companies are coming from who are hiring. And then I'll conclude with how we can get younger developers or new programmers into Perl and how we can nurture them and make sure that we continue to keep the bottom end growing while the top end expands as well. Okay, so that brings me nicely onto the Perl market. We're actually fortunate enough we live somewhere where we can pretty much work anywhere without any real restriction. Although there has been some bad press around immigration to various countries. But if you take for someone who's got various experience in this market, bringing candidates from other parts of Europe to other countries, that generally Perl developers, because there is a huge skills shortage, there's quite often welcomed with open arms, and not just from the companies who they've been hired by, but the local community as well. As you're aware, the US and the UK are the main Perl hubs, and yes, they are, with a huge number of opportunities there. But however, I've seen a lot of growth within other countries like the Netherlands, Germany, and France. But I'm happy to discuss the breakdown of opportunities and where they are afterwards, just come grab me or pop over to our stand. So speaking of evidence from the and knowledge of the market, both from speaking with candidates and clients alike, as well as a survey we commissioned earlier in the year, we have found that the permanent market is still either stable or growing, whereas the contract market has shrunk a little bit, and what we found is the rates have always been have shrunk a little bit as well. And it's my belief there is far too much emphasis put on a job title. It's not comparable from company to company. What a junior developer is in one business, maybe a mid-level or even a senior in another. It's generally comes from skill level and size of company and the sort of scale of projects that people will be working on. However, as a rough guide, I just want to give you a brief overview of what is meant by the terms. And again, I just want to reiterate, I know it's a skill-led thing and it is code-dependent, but I just thought I'd give you a quick rough shot of that. So what's generally meant by junior developer, from my experience, is it's up to a couple of years. From mid-level, 3 to 5. For a senior dev, 5 to 7. And from a dev manager, generally 7 plus. Although that's all relative, because it's more have done with the job and the role you've done. A vast majority of companies now are relying on their senior developers to take the slack of the head of development. And what I mean by that is there's more of a monitoring, a mentoring system where they're looking after junior developers and allowing them to progress, which allows the head of dev to be more business focused. And with the mid-level developers doing a lot more of the coding and taking more of responsibility over that, which is allowing the junior developers to progress. So, what are employers looking for? I guess if you're looking for work, then this is the main slide for you. Or if you're a hiring manager, then I'm guessing it's always good to know what our companies are, other companies are doing. So, as I've said, with the Perl market becoming exceptionally fast and competitive, it's vital when we have companies, when companies are choosing candidates. I'm sure it won't come as any huge surprise that the vast majority of companies are looking for, and especially web-based businesses, are looking for modern Perl experience with exposure to Catalyst. But again, Dancer or Modulicious is fine, especially if you can show some sort of tangible evidence of that. If you're a junior developer, there's training given on that. And if you're a senior developer without web-based experience or without modern Perl experience, then it's going to affect your salary, and we need to look at that. So my advice then would be, if you haven't had commercial experience with Catalyst or Modulicious or anything along those sort of lines, then do some in your spare time, get used to them. However, there is always exceptions to the rule. I work with a number of companies who use their own bespoke systems, or a number of larger companies who don't use them at all. The last few requirements I've had, and our survey expressed this as well, is that a lot of companies are moving away from your traditional just back-end developer into a more rounded developer. So they're looking for people with front-end experience, exposure to JavaScript. Now, that doesn't mean you have to work with it in your current job. If you come from a background of JavaScript, that's fine. So what I guess I'm saying is, if you haven't had that, then again in your spare time, get used to a bit of JavaScript, because that's the way the market is moving. And I wouldn't say there's any popular framework in that, although my front-end team tell me Angular is very popular at the moment. And again, with the deployment side, I would say a lot of companies I work with are looking for people with Puppet experience. So if you're a system-based developer or you come from a Linux sysadmin background, then play around with Puppet if you haven't done so already. And I guess the final bit, I put mentoring and management and passion there. So if you're a senior developer, how do you show passion for development? You show it by posting on blogs, you show it by attending events like this. And you also show willing to want to mentor and step into management. So what can candidates expect and look for? Now, I mentioned it a couple of times, it is a candidate-driven market. It is about candidate attraction. And it's not all about salary, although I'm sure we would agree that does help. It's about the whole package. For example, the candidate I mentioned earlier who had the 5 job offers didn't accept the one with the highest monetary value. He actually, in that sense, he actually took the lower one. However, this role allowed him more career prospects, more ownership over projects, and he felt the challenge was far superior. Now, another selling point for companies is company culture. Looking at integrating yourselves within the dev team, allowing more flow, and I guess that helps with the agile methodology. Although I do have a client whose all their staff is completely telecommute, but again, salaries are affected by that. And but then the cost of no travel clearly outweighs the benefits there. Now, in terms of salary, I have put together some numbers. Generally, it's just used as a guide, as it's normally dependent on size of business, location, etc. Obviously, London would pay more than Sofia, for example. So if we just look at the numbers here, we've got junior developer up to 35, mid-level up to 55, senior developer up to 70, head of dev 70 plus. Now, I put these there, I put euros next to it, but again, the correlation isn't always that simple between the UK and the rest of Europe. I don't want to harp too much on salary because as it's rather tenuous and it's done primarily on skill set. But again, I'm happy to talk through salary expectations afterwards. Now, I want to just mention, I work with a company just outside of London, so the cost of living is cheaper. So the salary may not be as competitive as it would be elsewhere. But then they have the exceptional benefit package, such as medical insurance, health and well-being cashback, life insurance, income protection, etc., pension, discount gym membership. Now, I just thought that I want to echo that because it means it's not just about the salary, it's about the whole package, as I've said. For some candidates, it's more about flexible working hours or part telecommute. Again, that varies from company to company, and again, I can cover that in a bit more detail afterwards. So how can we stand out as a candidate? So we all know what we can expect from a company, and we know which level to pitch ourselves out at. We know what salary we're looking for. So how in a candidate-driven market can we stand out from the crowd? How can we present ourselves as a brand in which we can make ourselves more and the most marketable as possible? A common mistake is it's not all about the CV. Yes, a CV is a powerful tool which needs to be clear, concise, and showcase your skills. It needs to be bullet pointed. It needs to be easy to read, as hiring managers will generally skim over a CV in a couple of minutes. But again, CV, I can go into a bit more detail afterwards. There is no magic formula to a CV. If there was, there wouldn't be 1,000 books on how to write a CV. When I screen candidates or when I speak to candidates on a phone, one of the first questions I ask is about the projects they've worked on or led. But quite often I've found this is omitted from their CV. However, if you ask the hiring managers in the audience today, they will say that's one of the first questions they're asked at interview. It's one of the things that makes candidates stand out. So if you want to stand out in that sense, put it on your CV, and it will pique the interest of the hiring manager who's looking at it. Now, I also want to mention example code. It's another one I'm often asked for. So my suggestion is if you have a GitHub account or contribute to CPAN, then put it on your CV. And I appreciate everyone is extremely busy, but if you do have time, do some code in your spare time because it shows interest and it does help when you're looking for a job. And I would also ask, do you have a LinkedIn account? I understand a lot of, and is it updated? Because a lot of managers, when they get a CV, will often take a brief look at CV and then go onto LinkedIn. So make sure it's updated. Make sure there's recommendations on there. Not just from your managers, but from your peers as well, because it shows you're respected within the team. Again, are you active on social media? Are you talking about Perl on Twitter? And are you asking questions? It just shows that passion I've been alluding to a lot. And it helps develop the brand, your brand as a developer. And I guess I would also say, if you do go to meetups, especially if you're a junior developer, put it on your CV. Mention you've been to Yapsy, etc., because it just it stands out. So current trends in interview process. So we've stood out from the crowd and we've secured an interview. The process of interviews has evolved over the years. And it's different from company to company. However, I feel it's always helpful to reiterate the best approach to an interview. Although the process, again, as I said, the process will generally differ from business to business, but the basis is the same. A number of businesses now will often have a test beforehand. This is done in a variety of ways, be it timed or in your own time. But often it's more about the approach than how you actually approach it. Now I'm going to have to skip on because I'm running out of time. So again, telephone interviews, be clear, concise, stand up when you're on the phone, make sure your battery is charged, etc. It's amazing how many people forget that. So I just want to come on to probably the most important one, the future of Perl. The question I get asked every single event I go to, everywhere I go, is Perl dying? Short answer is no. There are tons of requirements on my desk at the moment throughout Europe, and it's through natural growth. There's about 90% that's through natural growth. It's not all about replacement. Dev teams across Europe are expanding, and there's a huge surge of new projects coming out. I've even had some greenfield projects recently, and even seen some startups starting to use Perl. And yes, some companies have moved away from Perl, but not all of them. There are still a lot of people out there using it. And I guess in summary, the Perl market is strong. It's an exciting time to be a Perl developer. There are lots of opportunities out there, and there's lots of room for progression. It's a real exciting time to be a developer. I guess, any questions? Yes?
One, two. Okay. My question is, I don't know how much you follow the Perl echo chamber blogs and so on. There has been a very recent, as recent as 2 weeks ago, post by Dave Cross, one of the older members of the community, one of the better paid members of our community, by the way, about Perl being basically dead and entirely contradicting everything you said today.
Yeah.
How would you, reconcile this?
I guess I heard Dave spoke to me about that. But what I would say to that is, on a day-to-day basis, I'm speaking to clients from different companies. So I do have a first-hand account of that. My part of jobs is increasing like that. There are a number of opportunities out there. A lot of them aren't posted out there, so the community may have not seen them. A lot of companies will hire a Perl developer, whether they're looking or not. So that was what I mean by there are a lot of opportunities.
So you disagree with him more or less?
I wouldn't say totally disagree with him, but I have a different opinion, let's say that.
Yeah, hi. You mentioned right at the beginning sort of web frameworks as being part of, like Catalyst and Dancer, for example, as being part of modern Perl. What about other usages of Perl, for example, sort of scientific use? Do you see much of need for developers in those kinds of areas?
Yes, although I've had a lot of scientific developers go web-based.
Oh, okay.
But yes, there are still a lot of institutes out there who are after scientific programmers.
Okay. And there was another question, actually, about mentoring.
Yeah.
If, say, you're in a small team or something or other, and there isn't actually huge opportunity there to sort of, say, practice or do stuff like that, how would you recommend a developer wanting to get mentoring experience to be able to put on their CV, to actually be able to mention it? How should you go about that?
I would say then, if there is an opportunity at your work, there will be at your local Perlmongers group. There will be junior developers there. And you can just take them under your wing and do it in your own time, is how I'd answer that.
Hi, Rick. I'd just like to say that I thought your talk was really helpful. I think it reflects my experiences, at least in the UK. And I'd just like to point out that I'm a similar era to Dave Cross. And I left a job in February because I needed some time off. And I was able to find a job, no trouble, doing modern Perl, even though I hadn't any in my CV in the past. Now, obviously, I had my own personal networking helped, but I think you were alluding to that anyway. And I, like everybody else, have been inundated with, the variety of Perls dying, Perls this, Perls that. My opinion right now is that if people really want jobs and they do the kind of things they need to do in order to progress their careers, they're not going to have that much trouble.
I agree. And the candidate I mentioned earlier about who had the 5 offers, I actually had 11 interviews for him. But we just didn't have a time. We moved so quickly with it, we didn't have time to see all the companies. So one mid-level developer with 4 or 5 years experience, 11 interviews in the space of 2 weeks.
Unfortunately, we don't have any more time for questions, so please find our speaker in the break. Let's thank him again for the great talk. We will have an 8-minute break, and we're moving on with the schedule.